These immigrant hymns. That one started off in Finland. Here's another one that came here via Puerto Rico. Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. You feeling lucky? Did you have a good party yesterday? Does it feel like a great time to be alive? Okay, Joe says yes, so, he's good. You can go have a coffee or something. If you're not feeling in such a party mood, let me tell you why I think we're so lucky to be alive right now. I really loved the bicentennial year. I was old enough to remember it and enjoy all the fun things we did in school and wearing tri-corner hats and stuff, but not old enough to recognize any sort of cynicism or commercialism, which older people now tell me, like, oh my God, the bicentennial, it was bicentennial this and bicentennial that and bicentennial basomatic fish or whatever. For me, it was just this great party. Time to think about what it meant to be a citizen of this country and to be glad it existed. So I'm kind of bummed right now. I mean, this should be a great celebratory birthday, like big birthdays are. And there's a lot about just how things are going in the country right now, but also the very specific corruption of America 250, the 10-year bipartisan non-political commission that was set up to have a grand party, including the Smithsonian's annual folk festival was going to be the folk festival to end them all on the Mall, celebrating American music over the last 250 years and beyond. Well, America 250 had most of its funding yanked, fed into Freedom 250, and we can see where the money didn't go. It didn't go into creating a huge national celebration, paying big artists, having events all over the country. It went into the pockets of no-bid contractors who slapped together booths on the cheap and presumably paid a nice fat kickback to the person who got them the contract. Just a small example of the deep corruption of the government with which we now suffer. It was just hard to feel patriotic for me. So what will the next big celebration be like? Well, I won't be here. But come the tricentennial in 2076, people will look back on this, the semi-quintennial of 2026, and what will they see? Will they see a corrupt government that brought about the end of the American experiment in radical freedom and the power of the people? One of the inflection points where a smaller and smaller number of wealthier and greedier elites came to control the country and the world? Will they shake their heads and say, yeah, that was the beginning of the end? Or will they look back on it as we look back upon Gettysburg, the civil rights movement, the times of crisis, violence, conflict, but a time when the country took a turn toward its ideals, toward becoming that America that the poet sings about? Well, whether the younger people of today, when they're grown to age 60, 70, 80, and 50 years, whether they tell our story with grief or gratitude depends what we do now and in the years to come, on how we meet this moment. The people singing how lucky we are to be alive right now, if you're not up on modern musicals, are characters in the great hip-hop opera Hamilton. They're singing in 1776. They're in New York City, which they call the greatest city in the world. and things are roiling. They're scared. They don't want to go to war. They don't know what's going to happen. But they feel lucky to be alive at a moment of crisis. Maybe because it's moments of crisis where we know just how alive we are. We know just how much what we do matters. Even three sisters who don't even have the right to vote, who sing that line for us. Look around at how lucky we are to be alive in a time of crisis. So the origin of the word crisis is not just something bad. It means a point of culmination, a point of separation, like the very tip top of a jagged mountain. It's an instant when things must change one way or another. They teeter on the cusp. And that makes them ripe with possibility and potential. If people in 1776 knew anything, they knew we don't know where this is going. It's exciting, it's important to our lives, and we hope to the future of this country that we are founding and the world. We are really alive right now because we don't know what's going to happen. Rebecca Solnit, who's not only an international, but one of our homegrown sages, being here in the Bay Area, she wrote a whole book about disaster as an opportunity that can bring out the best in people. Disaster, things that are incontrovertibly disasters, natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina. Well, some call that the federal flood, so it's partly a human-made and partly a natural disaster. 9/11, lesser known to us disasters like a tremendous explosion in Halifax Harbor that killed hundreds of people when an entire ammunition ship blew up and sent shrapnel down upon the city. Her book is called A Paradise Built in Hell: The Extraordinary Communities That Arise in Disaster. You know, the conventional wisdom is that in bad times, when people are stressed, terrified for their own lives and the lives of the people they care about the most, when resources are scarce, when nobody knows what's going to happen next, well, it brings out the worst in us. We're panicky, we draw in, all our altruism and generosity go out the window. She did considerable research and presents to us a not at all. On the contrary, she talks about the documented ways that people came together and took care of one another in ways that we don't do usually in times that there is no crisis, when everything was falling apart and when the future was so uncertain. They built a paradise by creating a community of care. She says, this is a paradise of rising to the occasion that points out, by contrast, how the rest of the time most of us fall down from the heights of possibility, down into diminished selves and dismal societies. Many now do not even hope for a better society, but they recognize it when they encounter it. And that discovery shines out even through the namelessness of their experience. Others recognize it, grasp it, make something of it, and long-term social and political transformations, both good and bad, arise from the wreckage. The door to potential paradises is in hell. If you've ever had a moment in the last year or so where you've thought, this is hell, we are in hell. We are making a hell for one another, and we don't know when it's going to end. Solnit wants you to know there's a door to potential paradises there. She says if paradise now arises in hell, it's because, this is again a quote, in the suspension of the usual order and the failure of most systems, that teetering, who knows where it's going to go, we are free to live and act another way. You know, I think we see that right now. I think we see the way systems are shaken and truths are exposed. Like in the political realm, it seems to me the pundits were divided this week between a whole bunch saying that the plain language of the 14th Amendment doesn't mean what it just says on the surface. Super duper clear. The people in 1866, okay, so slavery was on their mind. They could have said, if you were enslaved or are descended from people who were enslaved, you are a citizen of this country. But they didn't do that. They made it very simple. Born under the jurisdiction of this country or any of its states, you're a citizen. When the Supreme Court said the same, by a terrifyingly narrow margin, oh my gosh, the pundits went crazy. That's crazy talk, they said. That's radical. What do you mean? You're just born here and you're a citizen. It is radical, you know. Lots of nations do not have birthright citizenship. Many do, but many say that is too crazy. There's a lot of crazy in the dreams that created this country, all tangled up with the bigotry and the lack of vision, the lack of awareness that even, you know, women might be full human beings with full human rights like voting, owning property. The person who penned the glorious words of the Declaration of Independence also penned orders for buying and keeping human beings, enslaving his own children. And yet, what are we to make of this? It's radical. It's radical what we wrote. The Declaration of Independence and then the Bill of Rights, which I don't think would pass today because it is radical. What do you mean you can say anything you want? With very, very small restrictions, very narrowly defined. You can say it. It can be untrue, it can be cruel, it can be stupid, it can be radical. You can say it. Because, thank you, Project Uncensored, we don't believe we can have a free country without freedom of speech in the press. So that's those pundits. Another group of pundits that I seem to keep coming across this week were all up in arms about radicals, call them progressives, call them socialists, call them communists, always that terrifying word, were winning primaries, often in very safe Democratic districts, so that they're very likely to go to Congress in another few months. Radical. Again, you know, this country is pretty radical. I didn't see anything in the platform of those folks that would have made them out of place in FDR's cabinet. But that was pretty radical. You know, universal health care, he floated, got shot down by the American Medical Association at the time. Harry Truman carried it forward, though, and subsequent presidents have tried, have edged us in that direction. Anyway. You know, we've always been a country of paradox. Because freedom is scary. And even as people offered these great visions of freedom, they said, whoa, wait, can we really do that? And then we've had these marvelous, I won't say march toward greater freedom, but a stride in that direction and then a falling back. 2 strides and then 3 back. Sometimes a real move forward. Because once you put out that radical idea and once people taste it, what do you mean? This is the land of the free. We don't have a dictator. The polite term was king, but, you know, they were dictators. We get to vote for our representatives who make our laws. We don't have to abide by anything that we didn't put a word in on. With all the bigotry built in that's still there, how long it has taken for everybody to even get the right to vote, and how much pushback there still is. We're out there. Once we say it, people don't want to lose it. Ai Weiwei is a wonderful contemporary artist, Chinese dissident artist, as it always says next to his name. He's usually under house arrest in his home in China. And speaking out of that position of imprisonment, he says, when you constrain freedom, freedom will take flight and land on a windowsill. So, the people in the revolution, they didn't know how it would turn out. Like I said, they were scared. I don't want to go to war. I don't know what's going to happen. They didn't know whether they were going to win. Really was a long shot. Once they won, they didn't know that the British government wouldn't come back and retake this land. And then there have been other times of great doubt in our country, like today, when people look and say, is this it? Is this where the experiment just goes and we don't get more democratic, but we just go into the history books as, well, that was a noble effort for 100 years, 150 years, 250 years. Like after the Battle of Gettysburg, that horrible, bloody battle. This moment of deep doubt where Lincoln prayed that the dead would not have sacrificed themselves in vain. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That was his prayer. He didn't know. Martin Luther King, coming along 100 years later and noting the promises of freedom, quoting this country's foundational documents back at all of us and saying, the country had written a promissory note, a check made out to African Americans that came back marked insufficient funds. This promise of freedom had not been fulfilled, and would it? He died not knowing. We still don't know. And then there's that Langston Hughes poem that reflects the voices of people all along the way who have said, we are falling short of this dream of the land of the free. I don't know if you're speaking to me. We're not there yet. And when freedom isn't extended to everybody, well, Billy Bragg, to go outside this country, British singer who recast the Internationale, he put a line in there, freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all. And that's what we've had, even in the right to vote, the most basic foundational right of those who want to make a democracy. If not everybody can vote, then it's a privilege of those who can, instead of a freedom extended to everybody. So are we lucky to be here where it matters, where what we do really matters? Where a Lincoln or a King or a Weiwei can look and say, what's going to happen? And we can help history happen in accordance with our dreams and not accordance with our worst fears and our cruelest moments. So I want to tell a story, another complex story. I won't go into all the complexity. Let's just say this story of heroism is not pure, just like our founders were not. were far from pure. The story of Esther, which is told in the book of Esther. Interesting book. It's the only book in the Bible that does not have the word God in it. No mention of God whatsoever. The story of Jews under Persian control, colonized. And Esther was a person who had great privilege, who lived on the inside, and she risked it to free others. I mean, this could be a whole sermon. I just want to say, I think we're all on the inside in some way. The inside is what we have. Even if we say tear it all down, what are we going to rebuild it with? With what we've got. We bring our biases, we bring our insider status and our flaws and everything else. So Esther's story is one for us, for those of us who are trying to change this thing for the better while it's running right here all around us. So Esther was secretly Jewish, newly the queen of King Ahasuerus. You might have heard of him by the name Xerxes. Ahasuerus, under the guidance of his grand vizier, Haman, is making his kingdom more and more repressive, and particularly threatening the freedom and the very lives of the country's Jewish minority. And then the Bible says, the book of Esther says, Esther sent a message to her cousin outside the court, her cousin Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come in to the king for 30 days. Mordecai really wants her to use this position to speak up for her people. And she says, here are the stakes. The law says if I go into that chamber, I am to be put to death. No exceptions for queens. Mordecai replies to her, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. And who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this. To be in that place in a time of crisis and danger where he can't say to her, oh, you'll be fine. The king loves you. He won't mind if you go in and say, actually, I'm one of that minority that you're oppressing, and I think it's wrong. Will you stop? He can't tell her that's safe. All he can say is, maybe this is why you're here, because we are all in danger for our lives. So Esther asks him to lead the community in fasting and praying for her, and resolves, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. She, like us, was living in the heart of empire, in the turmoil of injustice, the halls of power, not always wisely wielded. The hopes of her people were so far from realization that it must have seemed impossible. Why not just lay low, be one Jew who survived these persecutions? But Mordecai's words spoke to her. Maybe she was here for just such a time as this. Were we not made for such a time as this? All the peoples in all the world, with their various governments and their various lives, lived within complete oppression or attempts at freedom, never perfect. Here we are. Not knowing how it will come out, but with a great deal both to struggle against and to lift up as resources and help in making this country a better place. Were we not made for such a time as this? It happens over and over again, you know? We like to tell the happy ever after stories, but that's not how it happens. The civil rights activist A. Philip Randolph advised us, freedom is never given, it is won. And it was won in 1781. And it was won with the passing of the Constitution. And it was won in the Civil War. And it was won in the Civil Rights Movement. And it was lost many, many times in between. And so it wasn't won for good and all at Yorktown in 1781. That was an inflection point, a time when we moved toward our ideals, but as Lin-Manuel Miranda, the composer of Hamilton, notes, black and white soldiers alike wonder in that moment if this really means freedom, and he puts into the mouth of the man who kept hundreds of people in chains, George Washington, not yet. Coming up a little closer to our own day, in the 2018 race for governor in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, an African-American woman, ran against Brian Kemp, who was Secretary of State. That meant, just like our Secretary of State here in California, it was his job to guarantee free and fair elections during the race, and it therefore meant he really ought to recuse himself from that role while he was a candidate, but far from handing off his power as Secretary of State, he exploited it to the hilt. Polling places were closed, disproportionately in largely black districts. Voters were purged from the rolls. Again, guess who? People who requested absentee ballots just never received them, or they received them at a different address than the one that they had requested. While mostly white districts had more voting machines than they even needed, in many minority districts, there were insufficient machines, and people waited in line for many hours, sacrificing half a workday or more if they could. If their jobs were on the line, they gave up, and their vote was not counted. This is 2018, not 1962, we're talking about here. If you want to see it in a lot more detail, there's a good documentary called Suppressed, all about it. Abrams lost very narrowly. Who knows who really won? She knew that the race between her and Kemp, more importantly, between the voters who wanted her as their governor and those who wanted Kemp, had been a rigged contest. So she gave a non-concession speech. In her speech, she called on the best in us to make things right at last. She says, "But we are a mighty nation because we embedded in our national experiment the chance to fix what is broken." Not the illusion that nothing is broken. That's me talking. Just notice the chance to fix what is broken, to call out what is faltered, to demand fairness wherever it can be found. Our fight to count every vote is not about me, it's about us. It's about the democracy we share and our responsibility to preserve our way of life. And then she founded an organization to fight back against voter suppression, to make sure that every voice was heard and every vote was counted, as they've never been in our history, not once. What will we do to fix what is broken? We might have to fix what is broken about the mechanisms for fixing what is broken, which is where it gets really discouraging, but that's the work ahead of us. That's what might tip the crisis moment over toward greater freedom, greater realization of our promise. So folks, justice groups await us in the social hall. They always do, but they've spread out, they've got all their resources, they've got lots of room for you to come to the tables. And we usually remain seated for the postlude, but today we'll sing along with Roger's beautiful, stirring choice of music to go out of our sanctuary and into the world to make a difference. Go to one of those tables, make a pledge to the people who will celebrate this nation's 300th birthday. Make it so they look back at us and say, look at what happened in that crisis moment. Look at the ones who fed their neighbors, who got the vote out in suppressed areas, who worked for a mitigation of climate change, who did all these things that our folks are helping us do. They helped set us on the path to more freedom, to getting closer to our ideals. All these people are prophets, like Queen Esther and Ai Weiwei and Stacey Abrams, A. Philip Randolph, Langston Hughes. All of those whose attempts to vote have been met with ridicule or weaponized bureaucracy, threats, lynching. They risked far more than most of us have to do. Whether it's risky or not, here we are, alive right now, at a crisis point. We can make out of a moment of disaster, years of disaster, a paradise, or at least we can open the door to paradise. We have to act for our rights, for our beloved and hurting country, for our dream of this truly democratic government that Lincoln spoke of so eloquently. And I believe, as Mordecai told his cousin Esther, we were made for such a time as this. Our faith, our American faith, grew up intertwined with this country, for good and bad, both out of the Enlightenment tradition, which is a mixed bag, the supremacy of Europeans all mixed together with lofty hopes for freedom for all. We Unitarian Universalists have been preaching this from the beginning and shaping this country to preach it, and then to reflect and say, how are we doing? Oh, we're falling short. Let's go further. Let's go further. Let's notice our own contradictions. Let's read our own history. Let's know where we came from so we can know where we're going. The signers of the Declaration mutually pledged to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Esther said, if I perish, I perish. And in Lin-Manuel Miranda's imagining, those about to fight and in some cases die in the revolution raised their glasses to freedom and said, tomorrow there will be more of us. And so we join them today to make that true. Not to complete the revolution, because greater things always lie ahead. The freedom always has to be won again and again. But to push on past their imaginings towards a land even more free and fair and caring and beautiful and righteous than they could have dreamed. That would be a fabulous birthday celebration.